Hello, and welcome to the University of Utah Press's podcast. I'm Hannah New, and with me today is Beatrice Szymkowiak. The judge and wonderful poet Monica Yoon chose Szymkowiak's manuscript for the Aga Shahid Ali Prize in Poetry, and the book Birds came out in the spring of this year, 2023. Beatrice Szymkowiak is a French-American writer and scholar. She graduated with an MFA in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts in 2017 and obtained a PhD in creative writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 2022. She is the author of Red Zone, a poetry chapbook, as well as the winner of the 2017 Omni Dawn Single Poem Broadside Contest. Her work has also appeared in Terrain.org, Portland Review, Omniverse, Southern Humanities Review, and many others. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. I'd really like to start off with discussing the very unique format of your book and the relationship between your book and J.J. Audubon's Birds of America.
Of course. Birds is a poetry collection, but what distinguishes it from maybe other work of poetry is that it is a work of erasure, meaning I took an original text that was not a poetry text, and I erased part of the text to only keep words to make poem out of them. Why did I choose Birds of America by John James Audubon is, and I have to backtrack a little bit, I am interested in how we have come to the environmental crisis that we are in now, and how we have become so disconnected from the more than human world. So I looked at nature narratives that conceive humankind separate from the more than human world, from nature. I looked at their contribution to the present environmental crisis, including the extinctions of many species. So natural history is one of those nature narratives. John James Audubon was a naturalist from the 19th century. There was, for me, a connection between Audubon's work, who attempted to draw all the birds of America, and the fact that in 2018, it was announced that North America had lost 3 billion birds since the 1970s, which is about a third of the population of birds. Then I thought it was very interesting then to erase that text of Birds of America to expose disconnected approaches to the more than human world, and also to enact in some ways the literal erasure of the birds.
Yes. Clearly the erasure form was a great format to work with your book, and very poignant. You kind of already discussed how you decided on the format, but can you describe the process of looking at the text and making the poems?
So I decided to consider the text of Birds of America, which is like, I copied the text. It's in the public domain now. And I copied the text in the Word document. It's about like 1,500 pages of Word documents. So I took the text and I considered it as an archival cage. When I erased the words, I kept the order of them. I wanted that constraint, that cage, keep that cage. Through selective erasure, I started to compose lyrical poems. And then I added also some prose poems with my own words that were prompted by those erasure poems. And that kind of were tracing the link between the past and the 19th century and the natural history and the present with, the environmental crisis we are in right now.
Wow, great. Thank you for that. I found it a very, very interesting to read because I wouldn't have known they were erasure poems unless I, had gone deeper into your book. In your writings, in the titles and in the poems themselves, you use a lot of forward slashes. Can you describe two things about them, like why you use them and how, if someone's reading your poetry out loud, how they deal with the forward slash?
Yes, that's not easy. So the slashes, for me, I wanted to mark the erasure.
Yes.
So to make it visible, because if I had not put those slashes, maybe people would not have known that there was somewhere an erasure, something that had been cut out. That was really my intent behind the slashes, but also in some ways they reminded me of blades and wings that, are like just scattered through the book. And they allowed me also from time to time to kind of make a pose in the poems. And so, yes, to read the slashes, except, for maybe sometimes the pose that, we can mark, but sometimes the slashes comes within a word, so that's difficult. So usually I project the poem so that people see the poem as I read them.
Oh, great. I think you would. Do you mind reading us a poem, either I have Of Becoming or A Complete History, one of those two?
Yes, of course.
I have page numbers.
That would be great. Of Becoming, if you have
Becoming is page 55.
55. And it is actually my favorite poem
of
the collection. Of Becoming. An eclipse now roosts beneath our wings. We hear wolves howl and the monosyllables of an axe. Trees are felled, then maimed. We compose clocks with sticks, hang them around our necks. Forget the old elm that would gnarl wood into wishes. Maps peel off from beach logs. We mask with stone legends and act Lorée du Bois as a clearing. When fog moans through the forest, a cage is lit to guide our path. We vanish, dear blossom.
Great, thank you. So that's your favorite poem. So talk about why it's your favorite poem. And
yeah, I really love the images and language that came out of this poem, and I think I love it because it has still a mystery to it. Like, even for me, who wrote it, which is probably weird, but like it has a mystery, and then I think it speaks also about the complexity of all of it, of our entanglement with the more than human world. Here in that poem, there's also that idea of the cage, and sometimes we build cages, to feel secure, to have some comfort, but at the same time, sometimes we have that urge of getting out of that cage, and I don't know, it spoke to me also at a personal level.
Right, thank you. So sometimes I hear poets say, oh, you don't pick a favorite because they're like children, you have a favorite.
We do have favorites.
But you don't say it out loud. No. That's great to hear. Do you mind reading another one? I have The Latter Part of Autumn on page 14.
The Latter Part of Autumn. Our number, equal to that of the falling leaves of the trees in places raised by imagine taking flight, is falling. Cages swing light and remiss. The ground beneath sinks as nightfall rots in abundance of berries. We cannot conceive a single wing passing over a meadow, plunge headlong towards the earth that trembles.
Thank you. Do you find that you're viewing birds differently since this, or nature differently? Did this process change your outward perception of?
I think it did. I am more attentive to them in some ways, or maybe even attentive to more than the birds. And what's interesting is, like, when I wrote birds, it was in the midst of COVID,
right.
And I was stuck in Flagstaff, which and surrounded by a lot of natural beauty, and suddenly we could hear the birds so much, more than we had in the past, and I think yes, I do pay more attention now.
Yeah. I see you also got your PhD during the pandemic. Like, did you do that remotely, or?
I was lucky enough to have 2 fellowships back to back. So well, I talked also online, like many, but I had all that moment. For me, COVID also really corresponded with a time of writing, which was challenging at times, but also which was an incredible gift.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very interested in how writers handled that. Some took to writing more voraciously than before, and others it dampened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just that I feel like the pandemic made nature more precious to people, since you couldn't go out, to the movie theater or to restaurants. You were going, but a walk was okay, and I think that made people realize the lack of nature.
Yes, I think it did. But at the same time, I wish we would have kept that with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that now we have like maybe a swing back in the opposite direction, which is sad.
Yeah, I see it in my own life. Yeah, I think you're very much right. So when you need inspiration, what poets or writers or even what do you do to try to produce inspiration?
Well, that's the big question of every poet. Sometimes we like inspiration. Sometimes it comes, and it's wild beast. I read a lot of nonfiction actually, and I do research. So that is for me also a source of inspiration, and I regularly come back to some authors, some poets. Like, I have so many. Seamus Heaney, Alice Oswald on the other side of the Atlantic. On this side of the Atlantic, I would say W.S. Merwin, Craig Santos Perez, Juliana Spar, C.D. Wright. And I have also been very influenced by the mentors I had at the Institute of American Indian Arts, Sherwin Bitsui, John Naviyo Kane, Santi Fraser, and James Thomas Stevens. So they have had a huge influence on my writing and how I write now still.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Do you mind reading my favorite poem in your book, The Remembrance of Thousands? And this is not an erasure poem, correct? Or
it is actually the only erasure poem that is in prose.
Yeah.
So it is the last poem of the collection.
This is the one poem I didn't write the page number on.
The remembrance of thousands. Twig, twig, beloved. A field of quivering clover, and there, perched on a fence stake, adieu boughs and mosses. Borders breed through the night. Wings hatch from blades of grass cleave. Another, not louder than a love call, perched on a fence stake. Adieu gentle, as if spring or autumn. The hatchets have mangled the last pine's death. A chattering unsettles flocks after flocks.
That's great, thank you. I think that's just the perfect last poem for this manuscript.
Thank you.
I am going to ask you to read one of the prose poems that is non-erasure.
Oh, yes.
I don't have one picked out, though. So.
Oh, I can pick one for you.
When you like reading.
So the title is, of course, one of the line of the previous poems in the book. Out of their breasts, as if. I found a bird's skull blooming in an oak grove, like a plague doctor's mask. Its beak scented with pinyon and juniper. Death is discarnate in the desert. Crows shed dusk, and you collect the fledged shadows that now drape manzanitas. My fingers brush skeletal trees, fumbling for the flesh of residual rain. I meet you in the penumbra, murmur light from the first point of Eris.
Great, thank you so much. Do you have any other comments before we?
No, I'm always, happy if people, pick the book in a bookstore, in a library, and just, read it. And I hope, for me, the hope through that book is that people be immersed in the natural world, the birds' world, and maybe think about it, and maybe also change their way of their way of enacting with the natural world, of interacting with it.
Great. I agree with you. And I think this book does a good job of making people view things differently.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I just want, to raise some kind of ecological awareness, to put it in a more scholarly words.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. And this has been Hannah New with the University of Utah Press podcast.
Thank you.